Right, this is me actually already protecting myself from those particular hits that you're actually giving me because I did not bring Julius Malema, the Honorable Member of the Pan-African Parliament. But of course I came ready, fully armed, you know. But listen, you know, I cannot be able to make the Honorable Comrade Julius Malema come on the show because I want to. He only comes when he has the time. And so we are really trying to make sure that we have him on this particular station. And hopefully on Sunday, during this Sunday edition of In Focus, we definitely hope that we will be able to have him right here on the program. Hello there. Welcome to this special edition of In Focus. As always, my name is Eugene. And Angola, thank you for making time. It is not Sunday, it is actually on Tuesday, so don't get yourself worried. So we are talking about a very important conversation, the relevance of the Pan-African Parliament. The members are actually meeting here in Rwanda for the next 2 years. Of course, they've been here for a few days ago already. And we're going to be asking ourselves, how relevant is this particular organ of the African Union? And how much do you know about it? There are a lot of things that you should be able to know, which we'll be digging deeper into this particular program. So all you need to do is just add the hashtag InFocusRW, and of course we'll definitely be sampling those particular tweets that you've been sending through. Let's just take a look at one of them right here from John Mugabe, who's actually asking how much PAP knows about us, the people, as a determining factor of how much Africans should know about them. This is a very interesting one. How much do they know about us? Because we're here focusing more on how much do we know about them. Thank you so much for that particular tweet. Another one right here is from Miss Great Lakes, and what she says is, I don't know much about that parliament, but we need to know how long it's going to take to have a free movement of people in Africa. When are we getting peace in Southern Sudan, DRC, and Somalia? Thank you so much. It's a very relevant question and concern. We'll be hearing from the members. They are actually here with us. Let's also take a look at this one from Murigande, who is actually saying the Pan-African Parliament should strive to gain legislative powers other than playing the advisory role, and this can only be attained by ratifying the 2014 Malabo Protocol by all member states. Indeed, very important. We'll be finding out how they're carrying out their duties and, of course, what sort of powers they have right there. Elise, of course, we're going to be touching on corruption, and he says that corruption is rapidly becoming part of us, especially in Africa. In some countries, for instance, you cannot get a job or a place in school if you don't corrupt someone in higher authority. We all have a part to play in order to eradicate this vice. We'll be coming back to read some of these tweets, but of course, let me just introduce our panelists right here in the program. Thank you so much for making time and being part of us. Honorable Janet Ongera, who's actually a parliamentary a member of the Pan-African Parliament, and of course you represent Kenya in this house. Thank you for joining us in the program. Also with us is Honorable Reza Utem, Pan-African Parliament member from Mauritius. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. All
right, and of course also with us is Honorable Rwigamba Fidel, a member representing Rwanda. Thank you so much for being with us here.
Welcome.
Now, I want to start, my parents taught me well, and they said ladies first all the time. And so, Honorable Janet, I want to start with you because we understand that the Pan-African Parliament has its role and its job well cut out. One of them is to ensure the full participation of African peoples in the development and economic integration of the continent. Now, one of the concerns here is that when we're talking about this particular issue, we know that a majority of those watching us tonight, if we were to ask them, name 4 members of parliament in the Pan-African Parliament, you can take this to the bank. Some of them would not be able to name that. So how do you carry out this role when most of the citizens who are actually the target do not really know much about this organization or this group?
Thank you very much, Eugene, for first of all inviting us to this wonderful show. Mm-hmm. I'm very happy to be here this evening to talk about Pan-Africa Parliament. Yeah. I'm also the chair lady of the East Africa Region Caucus in Pan-Africa Parliament, which is composed of 13 countries. Indeed, as you have said, rightfully, Pan-Africa Parliament, its core mandate is to ensure the full participation of all African people in the economic and regional integration of our continent. And I can assure you that this is a mandate that we are very serious about. For members to become members of Pan-African Parliament, you don't just become a member or a country does not just choose you. What we do, we go through an election in our own national parliaments, and we are elected by other parliamentarians in the national parliaments. So it's not just any member who becomes a member of Pan-Africa Parliament. These are distinguished members of parliament in their own right in their countries, who have excelled in a national interest, and who the state feels that really they can be the flag bearers to represent their countries. Yes. So it means that when you come from your country, automatically you are known. Like I can tell you that the delegation from Kenya, we are 5 members of parliament who represent special interests to be in that Pan-Africa Parliament. Same with all other countries, same with Mauritius, same with the delegation from Rwanda, delegation from Ethiopia, delegation from Madagascar, who are within my caucus. So when we come to sit in Pan-African Parliament, we are really representing our people. You're representing the African people.
The African people. Let me just jump all the way to the island of Mauritius, because I want to read your thoughts on this, because what we've had in such instances of the election process of the members who represent their countries in such organs, in some instances it's been argued that they are given these positions as a way of either coming down the communities that they come from if they had lost some major parliamentary contests or major elections in their countries. So it's a way of just giving them a token, let's send you there so that, we calm you down, as a way of just appreciating you for helping us win the election. So then the representation ends up not being as effective as it's supposed to be, from what Honorable Janetta said.
I think each country is different, and each country has its own way of choosing its representative at the moment, because if the Malabo Convention is ratified, there's be a different way of selecting MPs. Now, I don't think that becoming a member of the Pan-African Parliament is like if you haven't got the big prize, so that's what you get in return. No, I think that the good thing about the Pan-African Parliament is every country, the 55 member states, have the same equal representation. You have 5 MPs, 3 from the government and 2 from the opposition. So whoever represents his country at the level of Pan-African Parliament represent the whole of the country, because you have both the government view and the opposition view. And after attending the session here, we go back to our parliament, we make a report to our clerk, and we ask questions. If there are issues that have been raised at the level of Pan-African Parliament that we think needs to be implemented in our own parliament, we lobby for these laws to be enacted. And if they are not, during parliamentary question time, we ask the question to the Minister of Foreign Affairs or the Prime Minister, why are you not ratifying such and such a thing? So I think that in choosing the people, the government officers and the opposition are very careful that they send people who they know has an international exposure and would be able to contribute both at the level of the Pan-African Parliament, but also coming back to their own country. They can share the experience.
So you want to refute the allegations that these are usually positions just given to people who are not experienced, as you have said, in terms of their outlook or the global outlook of things, just as an appreciation?
I cannot talk for other countries, but I can certainly say that the people I've met in this parliament are very wise people. I haven't come across anyone who came to this Pan-African Parliament, as if it was a price for coming here. I mean, everybody who comes here contribute. I mean, we have lively debates. This morning itself, we had the report of the activities of which has taken place between the last session to this session. And I can tell you that, it dragged on for more than 3 hours. We were still there debating, questioning and answering, and you can tell the quality of the MPs intervening that, they are not ordinary people. They're people, wise people with a lot of experience.
A lot of experience. Let me just jump over to Honorable Fidel. I mean, how does it make you feel that, a majority of people do not really understand or do not really know what exactly your role as a member of the Pan-African Parliament is, because for them they feel like we already have our MPs back here in Rwanda doing what they do at the Parliament. We probably know about the East African Legislative Assembly, but now the Pan-African Parliament, who are these people?
Thank you, Eugene. First of all, let me try to emphasize something my colleagues have said.
Yeah.
In the Constitutive Act establishing the Pan-African Parliament, it is said that each country must be represented by 5 MPs, of whom one must be a woman. And as far as possible, reflect all the political aspects of the country. That means parties and gender. And as far as I'm concerned, that's what Rwanda does, and that's what Kenya does, and that's what Mauritius does. Let me also add that these are people really of intelligence. Some have been prime ministers, have been former speakers. As far as I'm concerned, I think we elect people who really are worth being members of Pan-African Parliament. Now, coming to your question, Pan-African Parliament actually is not as known as it should be, partly because it was meant to be a legislative body, and that will bring us to something else.
Yes.
But it is not yet a legislative body. Much as it represents the African peoples, but it's not yet fully a legislative body. But it definitely represents the African peoples.
It does represent the African people.
When there is something we must have heard called the Malabo Protocol, when and if it is signed, ratified, and becomes a fully legislative body, I think it will be known fully. But holding its meetings like in Rwanda or like we did in Egypt is one way of making it known. Normally the seat is in Johannesburg, Midrand Johannesburg in South Africa, but holding the meetings, the sessions outside the headquarters is one way of making it known.
Popularizing it.
Even right now, we are making it known.
Popularized. It's good that you accept, and that is what I was looking for. That it's very important that we own up and say, yes, there are some gaps here and there. And I want to come back to Honorable Janet. This body is not yet a full legislative body, but we understand that one of its core roles, again, is work towards the harmonization or coordination of the laws of the member state. You've mentioned that you are playing a role in the East African community, and we understand that much as this organ, the East African community, is the fastest growing, body internationally, it is still grappling with issues of harmonization, yet they are only dealing with around 6 countries. And now we're looking at the Pan-African Parliament that actually has, or is supposed to actually deal with over 50 countries. So how do you do this job? Or this is just one of the items on paper but is not actually being practiced out there? How do you do this?
Well, Eugene, that's a really important question. You know, domestication of a protocol really requires the political goodwill of the states. It is one thing to sign a protocol.
Yes.
It's another thing to ratify a protocol, and that takes time. You will find there will be issues maybe of accreditation, issues of checking whether the instruments have made the required standards to the domestic law that you want to domesticate it into. Indeed, for example, the Malabo Protocol, which was signed in 2014, if I stand to be corrected, was signed by the heads of state in Addis Ababa. Yeah. But to date, only 10 countries have ratified it, but 19 have already signed. We require another 28 for it to come into force. These are issues that we are also grappling with within the Pan-Africa Parliament, and we are advocating our national parliaments to see that they can actually ratify this very important treaty. Because the moment we ratify this treaty, it means that the Pan-Africa Parliament will cease being a talk shop and will become a legislative body. And apart from just being the people's representative, it will now also be able to make model laws which other the national countries can be able to domesticate into their laws.
Right. You speak of political will, and you're saying 2014. This is when this particular document was actually put out there, and only 10 have ratified, and you say 19 have signed, and you need 28. Do you think that the individual parliaments, the local parliaments, are feeling a sense of a threat? Do you think that they feel like, after all, we are doing what we need to do, and they just want to come and be redundant and repeat what we already do back here? How would you describe their level of reluctance to actually ratify this?
Well, I think there was great wisdom in our heads of state signing the protocol and wanting really to wish to create this body to become a full legislative body, like what happens in the European Union. But I can tell you also, we are MPs, we are parliamentarians, we are politicians. And if there's one thing a politician hates, is to lose their control and grip of what they are. So there could be fears, and I want to be honest about it. Yeah. There could be fears that as an MP, you stand to lose another hat. Like, for example, myself, I'm wearing now 2 hats. I'm a member in my own national parliament. I represent Kisii County. And also here, I'm also another member of parliament. So I wear 2 hats. And I know that sometimes as legislators, we have that fear.
Speaking for yourself, do you have that fear?
Personally, I don't have the fear because I see that it's a good thing. And I'm one of the advocates that we need to create a stable parliament, a parliament that legislative laws and concentrates on ensuring that the people of Africa are fully integrated. And that cannot be done when we wear 2 hats.
Yeah.
It cannot work. You know, it cannot work.
It's important. In Mauritius, I mean, I want you to also speak for yourself because I believe in the diversity and contextualizing of things. Why or who do you think is actually standing on the way of this ratification? President Kagame himself has actually called on you members to actually support in actually the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. How will you do it? With your arms closed or held back? How will you do this?
I think before answering this question, let us step back and find out why do we leave legislative powers? Why is the relevance of the treaty that was signed by head of state of the African Union? The reason is one Africa, one voice.
Yeah.
You cannot have one Africa, one voice when you have conflicting legislation all over the place.
Yeah.
You need harmonization. You need harmonization. So you need a place where different representatives from different African countries will come and debate and then come up out of a consensus, a law which will then be applicable in every member state.
And they will argue and they'll tell you we have our local parliament that will deal with our local issues. We have a regional parliament that will deal with the East African community, for example, the SADC and the others. And so they feel like Pan-African Parliament is irrelevant. This is probably...
Well, I don't think it's irrelevant. I think there's this fear. The fear of losing sovereignty. You know, there is competition. You know, if I am from Mauritius, then I tend to look at Mauritian interests. The Mauritian interests may not be the same as in another African country. Yeah. You know, we take the example of, let's say, African countries who have oil and gas. Yeah. If you have another country who wants to vote a law for renewable energy and less fossil fuel, now there's economic policy involved here. You know, you're actually telling one African country that, you know, you should stop, you know, producing electricity out of fossil fuel. You should use water and renewable energy. and they need to be trade-off, and that is why you need to discuss, and the place where you discuss it is in a parliament, where you can hear the voice of all representatives and come out with common policies. I mean, I take the example of human rights issues. These are fundamental rights which is applicable to every state. It doesn't matter if you are in Mauritius, or you're in Rwanda, or you're in Kenya, or anywhere else. It's the same fundamental rights. Same thing applicable for gender issues, same thing applicable for the fight against corruption or the health issues. So there's so many things in common in the African that needs to be harmonized. And this is where this Pan-African Parliament has a role to play in unifying, harmonizing the applicable laws.
So what you're trying to say is also the way we want to have a common currency, we want to have a common government for the continent, we can actually have a common parliament. We collapse all our local parliaments and then we go one parliament?
Yeah, I don't think it's a matter of collapsing. I think each parliament will still have a role to play. It's just that you will have one superior parliament who will come with laws of general application, which every parliament then has to come and ratify. Right. And it would be on issues. Let's suppose we vote at the level of Pan-African Parliament for free movement of goods. We have a big common market, the African market become one. Obviously, you'll have to go in each local parliament, in each country, in each state, to ratify and give effect to that, because there will be consequential amendments. Yeah. You'll have to lift tariff barriers that will have an impact on your revenue. So there would be like Honorable Janet said, a domestication process. Yeah. But at least at the level of the Pan-African Parliament, we would have taken a policy decision, and then, there would be an implemented phase. Right. And if a member state doesn't implement, then he will be accountable. He will have to come before the Parliament and defend the reason why we voted the law and you have not been able to implement it in your country.
Right. So but quite often, there's always been that saying that if you don't implement, then you'll come and then account for that. But we have not seen anyone account for any of that, Honorable. Most of the time, we've seen, at the level of East African Community, for example, we have countries that have blatantly, overlooked protocols that they agreed on, especially on trade, some barring certain products from different countries or slapping them with some tariffs which are not supposed to be slapped according to the treaties, according to the protocol that they've signed. But nothing has happened to them. So how will they become accountable? What would you do to them?
I'm not sure that nothing happens to them. I think I come from the Committee of Cooperation and Dispute Resolution, and I can tell you that there are mechanisms. What we don't have is sanctions. We don't have the power to take sanctions against a member state which is not compliant, at least at the level of the Pan-African Parliament. But we have consensus. You have peer pressure. You have peer review. And these, neighbor countries, Pan-African countries, when they come and they examine your country and come up with a report. Now, it's really, you lose faith. You lose faith against your brothers and sisters in Africa if you say that you're going to do something and you didn't do it. And then, around the table we sit and we try to find a solution, because very often there may be genuine reasons why you did not implement.
Honorable Fidel.
Yes, please.
Probably there's someone who's watching us tonight, and all along their lives, they have actually probably hit 30 years or almost 40 years, God bless them, and they've not known about the Pan-African Parliament, and they've still survived. And they're like, I can still do without these people. What would you tell these people who are thinking along these lines, or probably they're going through issues in their own countries? We've had people who have actually tweeted and said, or mentioned specific countries. They've talked about Somalia, they've talked about South Sudan. What is Pan-African Parliament to them?
Pan-African, let me first of all say, when the African Union was constituted, in the balance of powers, there must be parliament, even in local terms. Yeah. There is a government, there is an executive, there is parliament, there is a court. Yeah. So among the organs of African Union, there is the commission, there is the parliament, there is the court. Yeah. So the parliament is there to do oversight. Much as I had said earlier that it hasn't yet got its full powers, but it will get one time. when Malabo Protocol is finalized, when it's finally ratified. So that person who hasn't seen Pan-African Parliament and who is asking himself or herself, what is it coming to do? I would tell him, look, I would actually repeat what Honorable Mohammed has said. If we have these superstructures, if we have a continental free trade, like continental free air travel, like one area network, we need to regulate these things. And if we need to regulate these things, then we need laws, continental laws, which will be put in effect. And I think it is up to us Africans. Let me give you an example. Look at our people dying in the Mediterranean.
Yes.
Every day. If we had these things that I'm talking about in place, these people, our children wouldn't be going, they would probably be going to Kenya, probably going to Cameroon or South Africa, instead of crossing to Europe and dying in the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
So I would tell that person, I would tell him to wake up and look at modern governance, where we need to balance powers, where we need to integrate. The more we integrate, the more we survive. We can't survive alone.
But I think there is much more. I just wanted to add a little bit to what my brother, Honorable Fidel, has said. There is also much more that the Pan-African Parliament does than meets the eye. For example, Pan-African Parliament is one of the bodies that does election observation. All elections that are held within the member states, AU, members of Parliament of Pan-Africa always go to observe these elections. And they've written beautiful reports, especially if they've seen malpractices or where the elections have been held in a free and fair atmosphere.
But those reports mostly are usually just shelved and nothing happens.
They are tabled within the AU, and as long as we've done our task, we've done the best by tabling them to the AU. The next, of course, is we discuss within our own Pan-Africa Parliament, we discuss these reports. When the president makes an activity report, we actually do deliberate on these issues.
Tell me any country that you actually did a report as Pan-African Parliament and it had an impact on the outcome or whatever the people of that country were going through that this report did save them from.
We have tabled many reports. In all these countries that we've done election observation missions, all of them, well, recently there was elections in Zimbabwe. The Pan-African did, they wrote a report. It's a joint report with the AU report. It's done under the AU and tabled to the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa. So there are many reports that we have tabled. And I think those are some of the good activities. There are issues on gender empowerment, particularly on the empowerment of women, the girl child, and now more than ever the boy child who is endangered. These are model laws that the women parliamentarians have made for the national parliaments to take up. There are issues on poverty levels in Africa. Disease, for example, we have even proposed that we have a laboratory, a research laboratory within Africa so that we can be able to deal with issues like Ebola, for example. And these are beautiful things that are being picked up with other international donor partners like the WHO picked up that idea. So there are some good things that the Parliament does. It's only unfortunate that perhaps we have not been as much in the media as we would really have wanted to be.
We need to do that more, right?
I think so.
I like that you mentioned the boy child is endangered. How? Why? I mean, someone is really interested in hearing that because today what we're talking about is women empowerment.
Yes, the campaign for the girl child has gone a notch higher, and which is very good in Africa. But now there are emerging issues, and the emerging issue is that the boy child is now also being neglected. And many campaigns now are to ensure that as we campaign for the girl child, we also carry along the boy child so that the two grow together.
I'm telling you, the feminists watching you right now will not be wanting to hear none of that.
I am a feminist, speaking from a point of knowledge. And these are issues that we discuss. In fact, if you are to come to the Commission on the Status of Women in New York, This year, that was one of the key issues that we discussed
Focus.
on the boy child.
Right. Let's now move to another very important thing that you are focusing on in your stay here in Rwanda, and that is the issue of corruption, because we understand that the African Union is actually putting this top on its agenda in order to achieve its new reforms. But sadly, 12 out of the 20 most corrupt countries in the world, according to Transparency International, are from Africa. 12 out of 20. They are from Africa, and we can name them, but this is what we have out of there. Let's just get into matter specific, and Janet, I want to start with you, because you're closer here to me. One of the problems that is being said by Anti-Corruption Commission of Kenya is that the problem of corruption is actually getting even worse. And the figure for those who paid bribes to receive government services has actually risen to 62%, up from 46% in just 2 years ago. How then are we walking the talk if this is an issue of concern to us as Pan-Africanists?
Okay, thank you, Eugene. Eugene, you know, I'm a straight shooter.
Yes, shoot.
I must say that indeed it's true that we have issues of corruption in Kenya, and serious issues. But out of these, I can tell you that there is a light in the tunnel. And the light is in our president, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, and through the golden handshake with Honorable Raila Odinga, which brought down the temperatures, the fight for corruption has gone a notch higher in Kenya. So that for the very first time in Kenya, the big fish are being netted. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you are a member of parliament, you are a minister. You saw recently a former minister who is an ambassador has been brought to account for what happened when he was in office. People are actually now being brought. Formerly, the big fish were never nettled. It was always the small fish, maybe the accountants or the clerks. But the real culprits, the people who schemed and ensured that the money was reaped from the state coffers, are now being nettled. And I think that is a good start. And I can tell you our president is determined that there are no big fish or no small fish in nettling that. And I commend that. But as you know, corruption always comes to fight itself. Corruption always fights those who want to be good engines of ensuring that there is no corruption. So it is a concerned effort, and it's not just only we as leaders, it must also be from the people.
Right.
So that the people have within themselves, they are able to say, we are going to say no. If a policeman has stopped me and I'm wrong, I'm not going to bribe them. If, for example, you are going to the hospital and you need to get yourself to be treated, you are not going to take a backstage and maybe don't buy the medicine by bribing somebody to give you. So I think it is a concerted effort of both the citizenry and the leaders, and also the laws, you know, the laws that you have put in place on the mechanism.
So the people have a role to play here.
The people
have. I'm going to come back to interrogate some of the things that you've just said, especially on that particular issue, but let me just move on to Mauritius, because also Mauritius has had its fair share of dealing with these issues of corruption, but of course it's among the 54 least corrupt countries out of 175 countries, according to the 2017 Corruption Perception Index. But the role of your country, as far as being the center of the offshore services, continues to be under the spotlight. That this is where people are actually taking their mafaranga, their money, because it's a safe haven. I mean, how do you deal with this? Coming from there as a parliamentarian yourself who's advocating for anti-corruption, how does that even make you feel?
I'm glad you asked this question, Eugene, because aside of being a member of parliament, I'm also a lawyer, especially in international finance. From day one, when Mauritius, we launched our offshore sector, which is now called the global business sector, we made a policy decision. We had a choice of being a tax haven or of being a properly regulated financial center. And we chose the latter one. And we enacted laws, and then they were reviewed by the international community, the OECD, the G20. They came, they assessed us, they published report, and we acted on the report. a few weeks ago, there is an association of Eastern and Southern anti-money laundering group, which is a peer pressure group from Eastern and Southern Africa. And they published a report where they highlighted a number of weaknesses in Mauritius supervision. For example, they say that, our offshore sector, we have like 20,000 companies. But when we look at the number of suspicious transaction reports that are filed with the authorities, they are relatively low compared to this figure. And when you talk about the number of on-site inspection done by the regulator, it's relatively low. So what they were saying is that despite the fact that Mauritius, you have very good laws, on the implementation side, we're not confident that you're doing what is necessary to prevent money laundering. And we reacted to that. We reacted immediately in the budget of this year, the finance bill. We implemented measures to make it even tougher to use Mauritius for the purpose of money laundering. We have signed exchange of information agreement. But very often you need to know that it is very difficult to deal with money laundering because those who want to launder their money, they are sophisticated people using sophisticated means and legal advisors
Are we
and
surrendering?
accountants.
Are we saying we give
Of course
up?
not.
You guys are
Of course not. But I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example which has made the headlines. You have the government of Angola. The government of Angola has a sovereign fund. The son of the former president of Angola, Dos Santos, he was responsible for this fund. He enters into an agreement with a fund manager who is called a guy from Switzerland. And they set up funds in Mauritius for investment purposes. So at the level of Mauritius, we ask for confirmation. Have you got all the rules, followed all the principles? Who is the beneficial owner of this fund? Is this fund clean money? And we get all the due diligence information that we need from the Angolan authorities. So the fund is set up. Millions of dollars, billion actually, is routed from Mauritius into various investment. And then there's a change in government in Angola, and the new president that comes in, there is an inquiry, and they think that there's something improper about these funds having set up. So they come to Mauritius. And what do we do in Mauritius? Immediately we froze all the bank accounts of these companies. There's a dozen of them. The case is in court, and we said to the people, you go and fight it out in court. We're not releasing any funds because the Angolan government has told us that there is a suspicion of this money having been illicitly...
And initially that would not have happened.
Initially it didn't happen because we got confirmation. You see, it's only when there's a change in government. Because, previously you get all the authorities to confirm because they were in power.
Now imagine if there was no change of authority. Then what would have happened to the people of Angola whose monies were being transferred?
Exactly. So it is also a problem in every country, that they make their own people accountable. They need to have the necessary laws. And I'll just transgress and react to something you mentioned when asking Honorable Janet. You started by saying Transparency International published a report, and Africa, we don't, do very well. Let me ask you a question. When there is corruption, there are two people involved. One who give, and one who take. Now, why doesn't Transparency International publish the list of people, of countries whose investors come and give bribe to get contract? Why don't they name and shame those who come and corrupt officials, those who come and play on the weaknesses of the African people, those who have the funds, because they are the one who come and corrupt I'm not talking about the small petty corruption. I'm talking about the big corruption, the big, the big power plants, the big infrastructure projects.
So you say Transparency International is compromised? Is this what you're trying to say?
I'm saying that you need to be balanced.
The report
if
is
you're going to blame Africa for being corrupt, then blame those who are corrupting Africa, and then take them to task. Ask these questions. I mean, once you have established that a company has bribed to get a contract, what sanction have you taken in this country?
Right. Let me jump to Fidel. Fidel, yes. I've never heard Rwanda have any complaints about Transparency International, because one of the things that we've always heard from Transparency International, as far as the corruption perception index is concerned, when it comes to Rwanda, Rwanda always ranks really well as one of the least corrupt countries. And taking from what the Honorable from Mauritius says, do you sense a feeling of trying to, shift goalposts, shift blame? When a report is reflecting badly on us, we want to turn and accuse the person doing the report. But when it's saying good things about us, we are happy to embrace it.
Thank you. And I wouldn't want to shift blame. Let's first clean our house.
Let's clean our house.
Let's clean our house. Let me first of all say that enacting laws, very good laws, very well elaborated laws, is not enough. Yeah. We need to implement these laws and implement them hard.
Yeah.
I can tell you, like, maybe recently we enacted a law, or rather we amended the old law,
yeah,
and we made the crime of corruption endless. It can't end. If you get corrupt today, 2018, even in 50 years, that crime will follow you. That's one way of, and of course we increased fines and imprisonment. So much as I agree with him, I know that there are some big investors who come and bribe, but they work on our weakness. Why should we be weak? So there, I don't quite agree. Why should we be weak? Why should we be compromised? Well, let's clean our house first. Let's implement let's enact laws, and let's implement them, and implement them seriously.
Right, implement them seriously. Honorable Janet, as I go to the screen to just touch and see what the people are tweeting, you mentioned earlier on the issue of President Uhuru Kenyatta fighting corruption like he's never done before. And for some critics, they feel that this is just for the sake of creating a legacy. And if he was not leaving at the end of his term as per the Constitution, for example, then things would have been business as usual. And so for people who are looking and they feel that this is just probably cosmetic, what sort of response would you be giving them on this?
Eugene, for me to say that Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta has done something commendable,
yeah,
I am coming, remember, from the opposition.
Yeah.
And for me to say that it is really the truth of the matter,
yeah,
that the president is determined from his heart to ensure that he leaves Kenya with a clean Kenya,
yeah,
a good legacy.
Yeah. And
it's not because his term is coming to an end. It is because he has made it his agenda to ensure that Kenya cannot be doing business as it's been doing.
Yeah.
It's not business as usual,
yeah,
that you walk into an office or you get a big multinational company.
Yeah.
In order for it to get a contract, you have got to give 10%.
Yeah.
President is determined, and it is not about his legacy.
It's not about his legacy.
It is about the people of Kenya.
About the people of Kenya. Let's read some of the tweets that have been coming through. Over here I have Louisa, who's a friend of the program, and she says, so is there a plan of changing this system of 2 hats, as mentioned by Honorable Ongera? Is there a plan? Is there a plan to change this particular issue of wearing 2 hats,
yes,
that you mentioned earlier on?
That is why we want to ratify the Malabo Protocol, so that we have a parliament that just sits in Johannesburg, Pan-Africa Parliament, and like Yala, for example. Yeah. So legislators will be elected by either their national governments or directly by the people to go and sit in South Africa.
So you cannot do 2.
So you will not wear 2 hats.
You cannot wear 2 hats.
You will not wear.
How far are we with implementing that?
That is why I told you 10 have ratified and 19 have signed.
Yeah.
We are remaining, if we can get another 19, I think it will be 19, 28. We need 28 for the protocol to come into force.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Currently we have 10.
Currently we have 10. Another one, just real quick. How do you explain people outside the continent that Africa is not a country? Still a common stereotype and source of discrimination. Let me just make sure that it comes through. Yes, there you have it. How do you explain people outside the continent that Africa is not a country? Still a common stereotype and source of discrimination, but still the continent can speak with one voice through the Pan-African Parliament. How not make it a contradiction? How do you make it, or how do you stop it from being a contradiction? I want to read your thoughts on this. Most of the time, we are reported as a country, yet Africa is a continent with different countries with its own uniqueness. So how do we speak with one voice without contradicting ourselves?
I think that the comment by this person is totally correct.
Yeah.
I mean, as a lawyer, I've participated in a number of roadshows where we were trying to raise finances for investment into Africa. And you would be amazed, countries like the United States know so little about Africa.
Yeah.
You know, I even have a slide which I use during my presentation showing in the big continent of Africa how many countries you can fit in. You know, we can fit in China and the United States and Russia and still have, you know, all these places, Africa. And this is a problem because I remember, for example, when Ebola hit the Western African countries, it impacted in tourism in Mauritius, which is, we never had Ebola in this way out, but because we are part of Africa. So
and this happened, and still we have members of the Pan-African Parliament who are supposed to speak on behalf of the people of Africa. So
yes, what I'm saying is there is a perception outside of Africa.
Yeah.
We African, we know who we are.
Yeah.
It's those outside of Africa who think that Africa is only one.
Right.
See? And, but the truth is, Africa is many countries, 55 countries. And I think that we should be proud of it. We should be proud of our diversity, but also our commonness.
Yeah.
You know, being one Africa, one voice, doesn't mean that, you know, we won't have our own individual specificities, our own cultural, historical, you know, background. But to answer your question, I think it's a question of awareness. What is very unfortunate is whenever you switch on an international news agency, whether it's BBC, CNN, you only hear bad things about Africa. You only hear, you know, things go wrong. You're not told about, you know, positive things. You know, the many riches, the many natural places that we have, the many cultural heritage that we have.
Story.
I think this is very important. And if we could, you know, lobby directly these countries, you know, have our own pressure groups. You know, like in the United States has a big, you know, group for representing African interests. Then whenever there's a law being passed in Congress, you have, you know, people come in and explain to the congressman, you know, what you're doing. Think Africa is not one. You know, there is different countries, so don't put all of us in the same table. So if there's a problem of corruption in one country, doesn't mean that you don't have corruption. And I can tell you something. You know, what really amazed me about Rwanda when I came here, really amazed me, is how clean you are. You know, and you know, you could be walking in Rwanda and think that you're in any state. You're probably better than most European states.
Right.
And I think this is a good story to tell, and people out there don't know about it.
We must tell this story. Honorable Fidel, these are things we've heard over time and again, as far as how Africa is portrayed. We've seen congressmen and women come to address us in our African parliaments. When will you go to the European Parliament to address them as an African coming from the Pan-African Parliament, to tell them that Africa is not one country, it is a continent with so many beautiful countries?
One way of doing it is what, like Honorable Mohammed has said. When he came here, he was amazed how clean this country is. Tomorrow, another country will be as clean. After tomorrow, another country will be clean. Very, very fast, we shall be very... All this is a process. Even Europe wasn't like this. At one time, they passed through this process that we are going through. And I can assure you that we are maybe faster than them.
Yeah.
So one of these days, we shall be going there to lecture to them.
Right.
In fact, incidentally, Eugene, our president of the Pan-Africa Parliament, Honorable Roger Nikoda, was actually addressing the European Union recently. He went to that parliament and he addressed them on issues of Africa.
So it's happening.
It is happening.
It is happening.
It is happening.
Eugene, let me tell you one thing. You remember when Rwanda opened its borders to all Africans, actually all peoples of the world. You know what is happening? The other day, Ghana opened. The other day, very recently, Ethiopia did. Yeah. So it is like bushfire.
So we can infect them with this good disease.
Yes.
Perfect. Let's read this one. Mugisha Eric says, what is their contribution to curing the corruption and embezzlement of public funds, which is currently growing in some parts of Africa? I don't know who wants to take this. How do we deal with this? Is this something that we can deal with a yardstick? Is it fair to deal with it with one yardstick?
I don't think that you can have a yardstick for dealing with corruption in Africa or in any part of the world. But I think, as I say, if the citizenry would rise up and become the whistleblowers, and these issues will manage to actually bring down corruption. If the people would rise up and know that corruption, it really reduces the economic development of any nation, it retards even the socio-economic development, and we come up as whistleblowers. We can whistle and say, here, we think in this department something is going wrong, something needs to be rectified, and the leaders also have a strong commitment to ensure that issues of corruption really are issues that we put behind ourselves so that we can move forward in having a one united Africa, in our diversity, in our richness of culture. I think we can manage to fight corruption.
We can manage to fight corruption.
If I can just chip in on that. I think the problem of corruption is twofold. On the one hand, people think that by corrupting people, by corrupting officials, they can get a benefit, they can get an advantage.
You can get the service even faster.
Which they would not have got otherwise. But secondly, and that is the danger, they think that they can get away with it. That is why they do it. So if you want to fight corruption, and corruption is very difficult to prove because no one's going to come forward and say, I bribed it. And no one will come and say that I've accepted bribe. So you need to have a mechanism to prevent it. And one of the ways of which in Mauritius we have adopted is to bring a legislation for unexplained wealth. If I'm a public official, I have $1,000 as salary every month. How come I can buy such a huge house?
So we need to have lifestyle audits so that we're able to know and
exactly.
explain their wealth.
So this way you don't have to show corruption. It is for them to come and explain how they got all the money.
Yeah, we need to go. Just in closing.
I just wanted to add on what Honorable Mohammed has said. It is all down to political will.
Political will.
Political will. When there is a political will, it will be done.
Right.
He was mentioning declaration of wealth. Here, I can't say here there is no corruption. There is still corruption. But there is declaration of wealth from the president to the lowest guy.
Right. And Honorable Janet, in Kenya, there's that debate going on. And people have actually politicized it. That is actually targeting my community. You want to target my leader. I mean, how will you deal with this then?
No, I can tell you in Kenya too, we have declaration of wealth.
But
right from the president to right to the smallest employee of the public servant. And I think it's a good thing. Right. And I don't think people should make it look like it's a targeting of a person of your tribe. Because when you are taking that money, your tribe does not come in. It's about yourself and your stomach and maybe your children.
Right.
And the tribe is not there. It's not an issue of the tribe, really. This we should be honest and accountable to ourselves and how we manage the resources that we have been entrusted with.
Right. I'll give you the final word just to sum up the program tonight. What sort of final message would you be giving those who are watching us? Just really briefly before we go.
Okay, I just want to say that our continent is a beautiful continent. It's endowed with many natural resources, and including ourselves as the people of Africa. and we can achieve critical mass. In other words, that we can rise up against our difficulties and our challenges by just having a united force, unity in our diversity, in the wealth of our cultural heritages that we have. And I can tell you, I have seen that diversity and unity amongst the members of Parliament of Pan-Africa Parliament.
Right.
And thank you for inviting us here.
Thank you,
and we are very happy to be in this beautiful country of Rwanda, and the hospitality is the greatest I've ever received.
Amazing.
In any other African country.
Nothing against the Honorable from Mauritius, nothing against the Honorable from Rwanda. I mean, as I told you when we were starting, I was taught well. She has the last word on that. But thank you so much for making time and coming through. Of course, thank you for all those who have been tweeting. Turatsinze says, before fighting corruption, we need to build our leadership on Africans rather than foreign pressure and use our resources to develop our nations. Strong leaders will be able to eradicate corruption. And that is definitely where we bring down the curtains to this special edition of In Focus. Maybe we could be able to have it twice a week, I don't know, but we'll see about that. I want to say thank you for joining us. We'll see you again on Sunday, 9 p.m. As always, I'm Eugene Anangwe. Good night for now.